The wooden doors of Courtroom 3 creaked open, slicing through the low murmur of conversations inside. Heads turned immediately. In walked Jordan Velasco, former K-9 officer, gray creeping through his beard and pain stitched into every line on his face. Beside him, trotting calmly with alert eyes and poised posture, was Knox, a seasoned German shepherd, once celebrated as the department's most reliable police dog, now caught in the middle of a legal storm no animal could ever understand. Jordan's dark blazer couldn't hide the wear and tear of 6 months away from duty, nor could it suppress the heaviness in his steps. This wasn't just about a dog. It was about dignity, legacy, loyalty. As they walked past the rows of silent spectators, Jordan avoided eye contact, but Knox's eyes scanned the room with a quiet intensity. He wasn't just a dog. He was a witness to something nobody had dared to speak aloud. At the bench sat Judge Noah Stenwick, a man known for his unshakable composure and cold interpretation of the law. He barely blinked as Jordan and Knox approached. Beside the judge, courtroom staff sat motionless, while Vivian Caruso, the prosecutor, adjusted her files with mechanical precision. The air was thick, and it wasn't just legal tension. It was something else, something instinctual. Jordan placed his hand on Knox's collar gently, but firmly. Before the judge could speak, Knox let out a single sharp bark. The sound wasn't loud, but it was precise, immediate. Eyes widened. Some gasped. A juror flinched. Stenwick's hand froze midair as he was about to strike the gavel. Then, slowly, the gavel dropped, not with authority, but with uncertainty. He stared at Knox, as if something in that bark cracked a memory long buried. "You'll need to control your dog, Mr. Velasco," Judge Stenwick finally said, voice lower than usual. Jordan looked directly at him. "He's not just reacting, Your Honor. He remembers." His voice wasn't aggressive. It was worn, low, filled with something deeper than frustration. Truth. A ripple moved through the room. Whispers followed. The silence that came afterward felt unnatural. Knox barked again, twice now, louder, and fixed his eyes on one man seated near the back. Malik Drayton, the police captain who had orchestrated the operation that ended Jordan's career. Drayton's jaw tensed. The courtroom went still. Judge Stenwick adjusted his glasses slowly, never taking his eyes off the dog. "Mr. Velasco," he said quietly, "this court was convened to determine ownership of a dog, but it seems we're about to uncover something else entirely." For a brief moment, Judge Stenwick remained completely still, his fingers resting on the edge of the bench as if gripping the edge of a cliff. The courtroom had fallen silent again, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Knox's gaze hadn't moved, still locked onto Malik Drayton, who sat near the rear with a tightened jaw and arms crossed. Something in the dog's body language, something primal, had shifted the energy in the room. This wasn't just instinct, it was recognition. Jordan Velasco cleared his throat. "Your Honor, if I may, Knox was there that night. He wasn't just a witness. He responded before any of us did. He knows who gave the order, and I believe he's trying to tell you that the wrong man is sitting in front of this court." His voice cracked slightly at the end, but he didn't flinch. He wasn't here to plead. He was here to be heard. Vivian Caruso stood slowly. "Objection, Your Honor. A dog's bark isn't legal testimony." She turned toward the spectators, her eyes scanning the jury pool. "This is a court of law, not a circus. Emotional appeals and speculation won't change the facts. Knox is department property, and Officer Velasco was removed from duty under investigation. That's why we're here." Stenwick didn't answer her immediately. Instead, he leaned back, his brow furrowed, his lips tight. Jordan could see it. Something was stirring in him. Not confusion, recognition. "Tell me, Mr. Velasco," the judge said slowly, "what exactly happened the night of the warehouse fire?" Jordan took a breath. There was a call about a possible hostage situation. The address was in a remote part of the industrial district. Knox and I were first on scene, followed by Officers Morell and Calloway. We cleared 2 floors without incident. Then came the order to breach. but something felt off. Knox froze at the door. He never does that unless there's danger. He paused. I reported it. I was told to go in anyway. The name Calloway seemed to catch Stenwick's attention. He glanced down, almost absently, at a folder beneath the bench, flipping to a tab marked from 5 years ago. His hand trembled slightly. Andre Calloway? He muttered under his breath. Before Jordan could respond, the courtroom doors creaked open once more. A woman stepped in, tall, sharp-eyed, in a gray coat. Ariana Coltrane, forensic veterinarian and estranged daughter of the judge. She walked straight toward Knox without saying a word. The moment her eyes met the dog's, his ears twitched. She knelt slowly. He remembers something, doesn't he? She whispered to Jordan. Something important. Something someone here wants buried. Ariana Coltrane's fingers moved gently behind Knox's ears, reading him not like a dog, but like a living file of forgotten evidence. She had worked with countless K-9 units in her career, but this felt different. His posture, his breathing, the subtle way his eyes kept flicking toward Malik Drayton. Knox wasn't just reacting to an old command. He was reliving something painful. Knox is holding on to trauma, she said quietly, standing up and facing the judge. I've seen it before, in war dogs who saw things no one ever wrote in a report. Her voice, though calm, carried weight. If he's reacting this strongly to someone in this room, it's not instinct, it's memory. Her eyes flicked toward Drayton, who scoffed under his breath and shook his head. This is absurd, Drayton said, rising. Are we really taking psychological analysis from a veterinarian now? With all due respect, Your Honor, we're allowing emotional theatrics to hijack a simple custody hearing. He shot a sharp look toward Jordan. This man was deemed unfit for duty. We can't rewrite the rules every time a former officer wants a reunion tour with his dog. Judge Stenwick didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked at Knox, then at his daughter. The tension between them was visible. Two people who hadn't spoken in years now forced into the same courtroom by a barking dog and a shared history. Ms. Coltrane, he said, his voice measured. If I allowed you to examine the dog officially, would you be willing to submit a formal behavioral report to this court? Ariana nodded without hesitation. Absolutely. Jordan stepped forward. There's more, he said. That night at the warehouse, Knox didn't just hesitate. He pulled me back, literally grabbed onto my gear and pulled me from the door. Seconds later, the explosion went off. Someone triggered it, and I believe the command to breach was a setup. The judge leaned forward. Do you have proof of that, Mr. Velasco? Jordan looked around the room. His eyes landed on a quiet figure seated in the back, partially hidden. Tatiana Morel, one of the officers from that night. She looked pale, nervous. Her eyes met Jordan's, and for a split second, something passed between them. A shared memory, a buried truth. But she looked away just as quickly. Ariana noticed it too. She stepped closer to Jordan and whispered, That officer. She knows something. Then, as if confirming her words, Knox turned his head sharply toward Tatiana and let out a deep, rumbling growl. Tatiana Morel hadn't planned to come to the hearing. She told herself she was just curious, that she only wanted to see how it all unfolded. But when she saw Jordan Velasco walk in with Knox, something twisted in her chest. Guilt, regret, fear. All of it came rushing back like a tide she'd tried to hold back for 6 months. And now, under the weight of Knox's growl and the judge's gaze, she realized she couldn't stay invisible much longer. From the bench, Judge Stenwick narrowed his eyes. Ms. Morel, he said, addressing her directly, you were part of the team the night of the warehouse explosion, correct? Tatiana hesitated, her voice catching in her throat. Yes, Your Honor. He gestured to the front of the courtroom. Then you'll take the stand. She walked slowly, as if each step peeled away layers of denial. When she sat, she avoided looking at Jordan. But Knox didn't look away from her. His body was tense, ears perked, waiting, not for aggression, but for truth. Ariana Coltrane stood beside him now, almost as if anchoring the animal's rising alertness. Tatiana swallowed hard. That night, I followed orders. We all did. But there was something off. Her voice cracked. We were told the building was clear, that the breach was standard. But when I saw Knox really stop, I knew something was wrong. I felt it. She paused. I should have said something. But Captain Drayton was leading the op, questioning him? That wasn't an option. Across the room, Malik Drayton shifted in his seat, jaw tight. He tried to keep his expression neutral, but even he couldn't hide the flash of panic that passed through his eyes. The judge caught it. So did Dante Holbrook, Jordan's attorney, who began scribbling notes like a man who'd just seen a crack in a dam. Tatiana continued. The order to breach came fast. Too fast. And when it all went wrong, Jordan was the one they blamed because he hesitated. Because he listened to his dog. Her voice dropped. But maybe that hesitation saved lives. Mine included. Silence followed. A silence not of disbelief, but of recognition. In that moment, the courtroom felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a confession chamber. And for the first time, Jordan saw something he hadn't expected to see on Tatiana's face. Courage. Knox sat down slowly, his eyes finally softening. Ariana knelt beside him, whispering, "He knew you had it in you." Then she looked toward the judge. "And now so do we." The courtroom no longer felt like a place of order. It was more like a dam holding back 6 months of silence. As Tatiana Morel stepped down from the witness stand, the energy in the room had shifted. Even those who had come with their minds made up now leaned forward, sensing that something larger than a custody hearing was unfolding. Jordan Velasco kept his eyes on Malik Drayton, who was still seated at the far end of the room, jaw clenched, arms crossed. But beneath the captain's usual stone-faced demeanor, there was a crack, just wide enough for doubt to leak through. Jordan could see it. So could Dante Holbrook, who stood and approached the bench with measured steps. "Your Honor," Dante said, "in light of Officer Morel's testimony, and considering the behavioral reaction of Knox, we request that the court subpoena all radio communications and dispatch logs from the night of the incident, especially those that would identify who authorized the breach." Judge Stenwick gave a subtle nod, but his voice was stern. "Captain Drayton, would you care to respond before I grant that request?" Drayton stood, adjusting his jacket like a man preparing for battle. "With all due respect, Your Honor, this has turned into a witch hunt. We followed procedure. No irregularities were found during internal review. The operation was deemed clean." His voice rose slightly, not from anger, but from desperation. "We can't go back and question every judgment call made in the field just because a dog barked." Ariana stepped forward, calm and focused. "It wasn't just a bark." Knox showed classic signs of associative memory and trauma. "He recognized you, Captain, not just as a former superior, but as someone tied to something dangerous. He doesn't react this way to strangers." Drayton's composure cracked. "This is absurd." But then Noah Stenwick leaned forward, his eyes colder than they'd been all day. "I served as legal counsel on a similar case years ago," he said slowly. "It involved a K-9 unit and an officer whose career was ruined over a buried communication log. That case never sat right with me, and I won't let this one follow the same path." Ariana looked toward Jordan, whose hand rested gently on Knox's back. For the first time, Jordan looked like a man no longer carrying his burden alone. Then, from the hallway outside, a courthouse officer entered with a brown envelope. "Your Honor," the officer said, "this just arrived from Internal Affairs, unopened files, marked confidential, related to the Velasco incident." Stenwick took the envelope without a word. The room went silent again. Judge Stenwick took the brown envelope with a kind of reverence, as if it were heavier than it looked. His fingers moved slowly across the seal, hesitation in every motion. The courtroom waited in complete stillness. No murmurs, no shuffling, not even the scratch of a pen. Every breath felt held, suspended in anticipation of what was about to surface after being buried for half a year. He pulled the contents from the envelope, 3 printed reports, a thumb drive, and a handwritten memo with a red stamp. Do not release, internal only. His brows furrowed as he read, flipping through the first report. With each page, his expression shifted. Confusion, then disbelief, then something far colder. Anger. According to these files, Stenwick began slowly, eyes locked on Drayton. The original radio dispatch logs were edited. The breach order never existed in the official chain of command. The voice that gave it wasn't recorded. There's mention of a corrupted audio file and an override access code tied to you, Captain Drayton. Malik Drayton's face drained of color. That's a mistake, he said quickly. I never authorized any override. I wasn't even on primary comms that night. The system says otherwise. Dante Holbrook interrupted. We'll need to examine that thumb drive. But if your login credentials were used to push a manual override, that means either you authorized the breach or someone used your access without your knowledge. Either way, someone's been lying. A low whisper ran through the courtroom like a distant storm. Vivian Caruso, the prosecutor, looked down at her desk, flipping rapidly through her own documents. Suddenly unsure of the case she thought she understood. In the back row, Tatiana Morel covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide. Ariana Coltrane looked toward Knox, whose ears twitched at the rising tension. He knew, she whispered. He knew there was no order. That's why he pulled Jordan back. Her voice broke slightly. If he hadn't, you'd be dead. Jordan Velasco closed his eyes for a moment, as if letting the weight of that truth settle in his bones. When he opened them again, they were focused, sharp. So the question is, he said slowly, what were we walking into that night? And who needed it to go wrong badly enough to fake a command? Judge Stenwick didn't answer. Instead, he held up the thumb drive like it was Exhibit A in a case not yet filed. This court is now moving beyond a custody hearing, he said. I'm calling for a full evidentiary review. We're far from finished. The courtroom had been cleared temporarily. A tech specialist from the courthouse IT department stood beside the judge's bench, connecting the thumb drive to a secure laptop. Everyone in the room, including Jordan, Ariana, and even Drayton, stood silently, as though the walls themselves were listening. All eyes were fixed on the monitor, waiting for the files to load. The screen flickered. Then, a dated interface opened. Radio transmissions, internal memos, and a folder marked Operation Blue Echo Audio Archive. The technician clicked it. Inside were multiple voice recordings, time-stamped to the night of the warehouse explosion. Most were standard routine chatter, code confirmations, check-ins. But then, at 22 hours 14 minutes and 7 seconds, a voice cut through the static. Team Bravo, breach on my command. Now, execute. The room stiffened. Judge Stenwick leaned in. That's not your voice, Captain Drayton. Drayton's jaw locked. No, it's not. I don't recognize it. But his face said otherwise. His eyes flickered with something between fear and shame. Ariana Coltrane narrowed her gaze, catching the micro-expression. Something didn't add up. Dante Holbrook turned to the technician. Is there metadata? Something to identify the source of the transmission? The technician nodded. Yes, sir. The file was uploaded manually at 3:21 a.m., 3 hours after the explosion. It bypassed the automated archiving system. The user login ID was masked, but, he paused, typing quickly, there's a trace of an external device, a tablet registered under an administrative account belonging to Chief Investigator Andre Calloway. A stunned silence fell across the courtroom. Jordan clenched his fists. Calloway? He wasn't even supposed to be on site that night. Exactly, Ariana whispered. But if he accessed the system hours later and inserted this voice command after the fact, then the breach order was planted. Vivian Caruso stood up slowly. Your Honor, this constitutes obstruction of justice, falsification of evidence, and possible conspiracy to harm an officer under command. I'm formally requesting that Calloway be subpoenaed immediately. Stenwick nodded, his voice firmer than ever. Request granted. And I want every communication log between Drayton and Calloway from the past 6 months. Jordan looked at Knox, who now lay calmly at his feet. For months, no one had believed him. Not internal affairs. Not his department. Not even himself some days. But this dog, his partner, had never stopped knowing the truth. And now, the lies were unraveling faster than anyone could control. And at the center of it all, one question remained. What was Calloway trying to hide that was worth risking Jordan's life and Knox's silence? Andre Calloway entró na sala de audiencia com pasos calculados y expreso de quem já estava 5 pasos a frente de todos. Ele usava turno cinza escuro impecável. Sem uma gata de suor visible. Mesmo sob os olheiros afiados que o cercavam. Mas Jordan Velasco conhecia bem aquele olhar. O mesmo que Calloway usava quando queria parecer limpo em meio a lama. Judge Stenwick gesticula para que Calloway tomasse o assento reservado as testemunhas. You've been called to clarify your involvement in the events surrounding Operation Blue Echo, including the submission of falsified audio evidence, Stenwick said plainly, his voice like steel. You have the right to counsel. Do you need a moment? Calloway smiled thinly. No need. I have nothing to hide. Ariana Coltrane leaned toward Dante Holbrook, whispering, That's the same smirk he wore when my father investigated that warehouse fire 10 years ago. He walked away clean back then too. Dante gave her a sideways glance. This time, they weren't going to let that happen again. On the stand, Calloway answered confidently. I accessed the archive hours after the event to back up the files. We were facing technical issues, and I uploaded a corrected version of the breach order to avoid confusion. It was a procedural decision. Jordan stood, fists clenched at his sides. You created a fake command and buried the original file. That's not procedural. That's manipulation. Calloway met his eyes with cold indifference. What I did prevented chaos. If word got out that no one had given the order, your hesitation would have been blamed for the entire explosion. You were already unstable. I cleaned it up, for your sake as much as ours. The room erupted in murmurs. Vivian Caruso slammed her hand on the desk. So you admit the breach command was falsified? Calloway's lips parted, but before he could respond, a courthouse officer whispered urgently into Judge Stenwick's ear. The judge's expression shifted. Your Honor, the officer said louder. We've received a security notice. Officer Morell's vehicle was found vandalized in the parking lot. The dashcam footage shows an unidentified man placing a burner phone under her car. Jordan's eyes locked with Ariana's. This isn't over, he whispered. They're still trying to bury it. Even now. Knox stood up suddenly, ears perked, growling low. His instincts told him. The danger wasn't just in the courtroom anymore. It was moving closer. The judge called for a recess, but the tension didn't leave the room. It followed everyone into the hallways, down the stairwells, and out into the late afternoon light. Jordan, Ariana, and Knox stepped outside the courthouse, their breaths visible in the crisp autumn air. What had begun as a fight for a dog's custody had now become something far more dangerous. A confrontation with a system that had protected itself at all costs. Near the parking lot, Tatiana Morell stood beside her vandalized car, staring at the broken windshield and the phone still taped under her wheel well. They're not trying to scare me, she said quietly to Jordan. They're trying to shut me up. Ariana pulled out her phone, dialing her father. You need to increase security around the courthouse. This is no longer just a legal matter. Someone is actively interfering with witnesses. Inside the courtroom, Andre Calloway remained seated, calm, almost too calm. But he knew his time was running short. Evidence was piling up. Voices were growing louder. Vivian Caruso had already filed an emergency motion to suspend his access to department systems. Still, he hadn't lost control yet. And that's what made him dangerous. Back near the steps, Jordan knelt next to Knox, his voice low. You knew all along, he whispered. Even when I doubted myself. Even when they called me paranoid, unstable. You were the only one who never looked away. Knox licked Jordan's hand, then suddenly turned his head toward the street. His body stiffened. Jordan followed his gaze. A black sedan, parked across the intersection, engine running. The windows were tinted. As if on cue, the vehicle peeled off the curb and began driving toward them. Slow, deliberate, like a warning wrapped in metal. "Get down!" Jordan shouted. Ariana pulled Tatiana behind the courthouse pillar just as the car sped up, then braked hard and screeched away before officers could respond. But the message was clear. Someone wanted this case closed by any means necessary. Inside, Judge Stenwick reconvened court with a voice like ice. "This case is now under formal criminal review. Officer Calloway, you are being placed under immediate investigation." Calloway stood, calm as ever. "You'll never prove intent," he said. "All you have are gaps in protocol and a barking dog." Jordan stepped forward. "No," he said. "What I have is a partner who saw everything, who remembered what no one else would dare say out loud." Knox stood at Jordan's side, growling low. Tomorrow the verdict would come. But tonight they all knew someone wouldn't sleep easy. The morning sun broke through the windows of the courthouse like a silent promise. Today, the truth would finally be heard in full voice. Jordan Velasco sat at the front of the courtroom, his hands resting calmly on Knox's back. The room was full: reporters, fellow officers, quiet supporters, and a few who once doubted him. Now, they watched with widened eyes, waiting to see justice unfold. Judge Stenwick entered slowly, holding the final report from Internal Affairs in one hand and a typed verdict in the other. His expression gave nothing away, but his eyes lingered for a long second on Knox. Pause that said, "I see you now. I believe you." Then he turned to the room. "This court has reviewed the new evidence, the testimonies, and the integrity of the original investigation," he began. "It is the judgment of this court that Officer Jordan Velasco acted appropriately in the events surrounding Operation Blue Echo. The altered audio file, falsified breach order, and the subsequent cover-up have been attributed to misconduct by Andre Calloway, who is now under federal investigation." Gasps filled the room. Some cried. Others sighed in relief. Stenwick continued, his voice steady. "Furthermore, this court finds no legal justification to retain custody of the K-9 unit known as Knox. Given his emotional bond, behavioral responses, and the trauma he endured alongside Officer Velasco, I hereby grant permanent custody of Knox to Mr. Velasco." Jordan didn't move at first. He just sat there, frozen, overwhelmed. Ariana Coltrane, seated beside him, touched his arm gently. "It's over," she whispered. "You got him back, and you cleared your name." Jordan stood, but instead of speaking, he knelt and hugged Knox. The German shepherd pressed his head into Jordan's chest, tail wagging. Not out of excitement, but out of peace, out of homecoming. As the courtroom emptied, Malik Drayton walked past Jordan without a word. His career in tatters, his name under scrutiny. Tatiana Morel gave Jordan a nod of quiet respect before slipping away. Ariana stayed behind, watching as father and daughter, Noah and Ariana, exchanged a look. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. Outside, the wind had shifted. It wasn't cold anymore. Jordan walked through the courthouse steps with Knox at his side. The leash loose, the bond unbreakable. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But he didn't speak to any of them. Instead, he whispered to Knox, "We did it, boy. They finally heard you." And this time, there was no need to bark. The world had listened.